The sequel trilogy is one of the most baffling series I have ever seen, mainly because it very clearly wasn't planned in advance.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
I don't know how Disney was okay with spending $1 billion just to wing it, but it happened, I guess, and here we are. Full disclosure, I don't like this trilogy. It has its high points, but overall it was riddled by mistakes that dampened my enthusiasm for Star Wars as a whole. And I know, some sexy guy on the internet whining about Star Wars. What a surprise. No one hates Star Wars more than a Star Wars fan. My statement on my dead enthusiasm may sound hyperbolic, and there are obviously other factors, such as my existential anguish and growing disdain for meh movies as opposed to great or terrible ones. But we're not here to discuss those. We're here to fix this thing, and by Babu, we're gonna. So let's go movie by movie and correct what was wrong. Follow me! Oh wait, first, let me get this one out of the way. Change number 0, the premise. The beginning of my fall to the indifferent side occurred when I realized that of all the avenues Disney could have picked, they chose the Rebels and Empire. Or, I'm sorry, Resistance and First Order. I believe this straight up was the first of 1,000 cuts that did permanent damage to this franchise. Because it began this new canon with the thesis that said Mimicry was superior to Risk. By hosting this all-new, all-different series in what was effectively a poorer imitation of a classic, Disney invited comparative criticism while simultaneously stifling its own writers. They basically killed this thing in the cradle by limiting the scope of what they could tell. I'll always appreciate a hero who failed over a coward who succeeded, and this series is definitely the latter. Which is kinda funny because it makes the prequel series retroactively better. Especially when Jar Jar steps in doo-doo, wasn't that hilarious? If it were up to me, I'd let the past die, and or kill it if I had to. Disney has decades of lore to poach. I'll forever scream about how cool the Yuuzhan Vong are. Or they could do the Killik. Or maybe the Gungans attack. Or heck, even what Legends did, which is actually the Empire again. Or rather, the Imperial Remnant versus the New Republic. Which is still fundamentally different because it evens the balance of power and makes the threat political as well as physical. Also, we get stupid sexy Palpatine and that's hot. Anyway, for the rest of this video, I'm gonna operate under the premise that the foundation of these movies are the same. I.e. that it's still Resistance versus First Order. There's no real way for me to fix this series otherwise, cause it'd be fundamentally different. So together, let's cut into our first victim. Change number 1, Starkiller Base. So The Force Awakens is about discovering and destroying a Death Star. Big whoop, we've seen that twice already. Let's switch it up. How about instead of Starkiller Base, we get the Kiln? Which, in my version of this story, is one of, if not the last cloning facility with Kaminoan technology. So instead of a Death Star rerun, our heroes are trying to prevent the First Order from getting a leg up in the war via an infinite supply of soldiers. Also, I know, no Starkiller Base means no destruction of the New Republic, right? Let's say then that the New Republic still exists, but is in such a fragile state that they've basically taken a non-interventionist policy when it comes to the First Order. The Resistance is semi-funded by the New Republic as a buffer/proxy, but the core worlds don't want anything to do with this new war on the Outer Rim. Hence why the Resistance is a ragtag group of misfits. Anyway, it'd be cool if the Kiln was just starting production or had just recently started. So we have a few batches of clones out and about, whereas the majority of the stormtroopers we see are non-clones. With this idea, you could even have experimental troopers that the Kiln poops out. Like Berserker clones that are bigger and stronger and meaner. Or clones with crab claws. Or whatever we want. The sky's the limit. The point is that we have an easy way of distinguishing First Order troopers from stormtroopers, because we have these variants that are easily identifiable and pose more of a threat to our heroes. And speaking of our heroes, change number 2, Finn. Remember how in all the promo posters we saw Finn prominently holding a lightsaber? And how in the Chinese poster we saw Finn less prominently holding a lightsaber? Yeah, instead of the old bait and switch, let's run with that idea and make Finn Force sensitive. I know technically he is Force sensitive according to J.J. Abrams, but honestly that's just more frustrating than validating, so let's ignore it. Finn should be Force sensitive, but he should not become a Jedi.
What?
Let me cook. We can leave Rey as is. She's an idealist who worships the Jedi Order and wants to meet Luke Skywalker and all that jazz. But Finn, more than anyone, is a rebel. So he shouldn't be interested in following the teachings of the Jedi and or inheriting the Luke role in the trio. Instead, he should be more free-spirited in his interpretation of the Force. Maybe he's not interested in discipline. Maybe he's so indifferent to the dark side that he can use it without being tempted. Again, the sky's the limit. Change number 3, Kylo Ren. So, minor change with big consequences. Kylo Ren should not lose to Rey.
What?
And I'm not saying this from a place of woman bad. I'm saying that narratively, this doesn't make sense. This is legitimately the first time Rey is using a lightsaber, yet she stunts on Kylo.
Are you not ashamed of yourself? Are you not embarrassed? This is really embarrassing.
And the counter-argument is usually that Kylo was wounded. Yeah, I know. He was also knuckle-rocking said wound, presumably to give himself a dark side buff. So one of two things happened. Either he was weakened, in which case, why would he punch his wound? Or he wasn't weakened, in which case he shouldn't have lost. Either way, the effect of Rey winning here is that there's no need for her to be afraid of Kylo on a go-forward basis. Every time they interacted in the next two movies, I was more baffled than worried. Because if I were Rey, I wouldn't ever fear Kylo. She beat him with zero training and then went and trained. So logically, she should have continually mopped the floor with him. But this trilogy and logic don't jive very well. Except my version, where Kylo wins. Luke didn't beat Vader in their first fight for a reason. Of all the things Disney chose to copy, it's strange that this wasn't one. Also, change number 3A, I guess. I think it'd be cool if Kylo was very strong in the Force, to the point where his power eclipses Rey's and Finn's, but his level of control is abysmal. So maybe he's trying to toss trees at Rey during their fight, but he keeps snapping them. Or they have a Force struggle where he just overwhelms her, but he expends too much power and has to take a breather. Stuff like that would mold him into this wildly dangerous, animal-like figure. Also, Rey should use the dark side in her fight against Kylo. Not intentionally, but out of desperation. In using it, she can survive, just barely, while we, the audience, have something to ponder over while we wait for... Change number 4. Cut to the chase. Cut the chase. This movie features a slow-speed pursuit as the First Order hunts what is seemingly the last of the Resistance, even though the rest of them respawn next movie. Nix all that, it's kind of not interesting. Instead, we can keep the initial attack and retreat, but I'd like the rest of this film to be about disparate splinter groups fighting the First Order. We can show a more even conflict and catch glimpses of disconnected skirmishes so as to get a better idea of the scale of the war. Change number 5. Hux. You know, Hux was a bit of a joke.
I'm still here.
Can he hear me? We have no ruler! Supremely...
And thus, a wasted opportunity. Let's fix that. First, cut any scene where he gets clowned on. Second, I'd like this movie to touch upon Hux's origins. Let's say he's the son of nobility from a sector that never actually belonged to the Empire, but was absorbed by the New Republic anyway. His family was relieved of their estate and replaced by elected officials, leaving them still breathtakingly wealthy, but removing them from the aristocracy. So, Hux joined the First Order. Long backstory, I know, but bear with me. It'll come back later. For now, let me just decide that Hux was the mastermind behind the attack at the beginning of this movie. Also, before the first movie, he used his family's relationships, wealth, and political influence to sway New Republic senators into assuming their hands-off approach to the war, thus giving the First Order legroom to get their groove on. Change number 6. Rose. I like Rose. I like her actress. I do not like how she was done dirty in The Rise of Skywalker. And unfortunately, I don't think she's necessary. Let me show you why. By replacing her with Poe. Here's the thing. Finn and Poe will still hit up Canto Bight, but instead of going to find a hacker, they're gonna try to secure funding for the Resistance from the bigwigs who run the sector. And instead of Rose teaching Finn, a child soldier, that he needs to fight for something and that bad stuff happens in the galaxy, we'll have Finn teach Poe that the enemies he's fighting, the stormtroopers he's killing, are just as human as he is. That way we fix 2 character arcs with 1 plot. Because instead of Poe learning to follow orders or whatever, he's understanding the humanity in the people he's facing. And as for the rest of this sequence, change number 7. Canto Bight. I imagine this version of Canto Bight to be a shared space that's occupied by the gangsters who rule it, Resistance delegates, and First Order delegates. And I imagine that the plot here is that Finn and Poe want to sabotage the First Order negotiations while securing the bag for their boys, which involves shenanigans with fighting the First Order in dark alleyways and whatever. But most importantly, since they can't get a meeting with the bigwigs via normal means, they have to win their way in via a competition of the racing variety. And you know what that means? Pod racing!
Here we go! Now this is
where the fun begins.
Just imagine a modern day pod racing sequence. Poe and Finn have to operate a 2-man ship while competing against gangsters and First Order pilots alike. Poe can show his skill, Finn can use the Force, everyone's happy. Yeah, this is editing Realm Spinner. From the future, ooh, time travel, ooh, shut up. I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, but Rose can just be the engineer who makes Finn and Poe's pod for the race. Then she can join the Resistance after and be part of the crew. Duh. So every time I reference Poe and Finn from now on, just assume Rose is there too. Get it? Got it? Good. Okay, thanks, bye! I'd end this Canto Bight sequence with Poe and Finn joining the meeting only to realize Hux is there. And with them finding out that Hux has seduced the gang lords to the First Order's side by promising them territory in the Outer Rim and fringes of the New Republic. Instead of Finn and Rose riding horse things through the streets, it can be Finn and Poe running from the Knights of Ren, remember those guys?
Nope.
And getting captured after killing a few. Also cut every instance of Phasma in this movie and replace her with the Knights of Ren so they can actually do something. I thought she was dumped into a trash compactor on an exploding Starkiller base. How did she even survive that? Anyway, that's it for this movie. You probably noticed I haven't said a peep about Rey's story. I'm fine with it. Luke can drink his milk, Rey can be a nobody. Cut the Yoda cameo, but otherwise I like everything here. Oh, except Rey should again use the dark side when facing the Imperial Guard, despite trying to be disciplined and pure-hearted. Wait for it, it'll come back. Change number 8. Palpatine. Get him out of here. Just like the Death Star in Force Awakens, Palpatine is a rehash that we do not need. No, Kylo doesn't apprentice under this old fart. No, Rey is not related to this old fart. Yes, euthanizing Grandpa will have a ripple effect on this movie, so we're gonna have to reshuffle the furniture, so to speak. Change number 9. No more fetch quest. Scratch all that stuff with the dagger and the Death Star. This movie is about the newly funded First Order closing in on the last of the Resistance. Our heroes are on the run, trying to find a way to strike back before it's too late. They can realize that their best bet is to lure out the new Supreme Leader, Kylo Ben Ren Swallow, by using Rey as bait. So they do, with our finale taking place on, let's say, Yavin 4 to appeal to nostalgia. The climax will be on 2 fronts, space and ground. Change number 10. The final boss. Sis. So we're gonna go two ways here. First will be the path of Poe and Finn. They'll board the First Order's prime capital ship and fight their way to the bridge where Hux leads from. There the two will face the remaining Knights of Ren. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Rey will lead the defense against Kylo Ren's ground assault, and face Kylo in a final duel. Finn and Poe face the Knights of Ren. It'd be cool if at this point Finn is kinda just casually good with the Force, maybe as a natural prodigy, although he can use it in weird ways since he's not a Jedi. But I digress. He and Poe will defeat the Knights of Ren, but Hux will order his men to fire on the planet and Kylo. So Kylo and Rey can have a last duel in the burning ruins of a besieged planet while being orbitally bombarded.
That is the most metal thing I ever heard in my whole life. High five.
For a final time, Rey will tap into her anger, but instead of using the dark side, she can realize that suppressing her anger isn't just impossible, it's unhealthy. And by releasing that mental lock, she can unlock a stronger connection to the light side and beat Kylo the way she wants to, using her anger not as a bludgeon, but a scalpel. Perfect end to Kylo, in my opinion, would be him dangling off the edge of a cliff with Rey offering him a hand up, but Kylo refusing and dying instead. Hateful and bitter to the very end. I'd have Finn and Poe capture Hux, and the war to kind of fizzle out from there. Hux can say he's not done, and maybe he isn't, who knows. Either way, that's the end. For now. I think this version of the story would be more focused than the original. If you notice, most of my points are about characters. Their purpose is to amplify what I thought worked and shed what I thought didn't. And in doing so, create a through line that we as audience members could connect to. Because as is, Poe is barely a character, Finn devolves as the series goes on, and Rey is fine. Like with everything else in this trilogy, Disney didn't want to innovate. They wanted to replicate, which is why we learn about Poe's smuggling past in Rise of Skywalker so he can be more like Han Solo, and why Rey must be tempted in a way almost identical to Luke. And third thing about Finn being Leia. The problem with the sequel trilogy is that it lacks an identity, and in doing so it lacks an impact, which is why as a meta-commentary, I thought it'd be interesting for my revised characters to have arcs that expanded beyond their universe. Finn specifically rejects the teachings of the Jedi because he wants to make his own way. Poe takes joy in killing faceless stormtroopers until he's confronted with the idea of the faces behind the masks. Rey tries to be the perfect Jedi, but realizes she can't and shouldn't be. Kylo is a Vader/Empire fanboy who, despite saying,
"It's time to let old things die,"
is obsessed with returning to the way things were and restoring an old glory that wasn't ever real. And Hux is the puppeteer who uses Kylo as his attack dog in hopes of reaping the rewards for himself. So we have narratives on top of narratives that shape this trilogy into a story beyond just good versus evil. We have a drama about competing ideas of what power means and how it should be used. And we get a Star Wars that isn't afraid to say something. I think that'd be cool. That's all for this one. Like and subscribe, because I've got rewrites, fixes, essays, and whatnot in the pipeline. And until the next one, cheers.